Here, a 4-year-old boy named Caleb Porter was missing. Suddenly, every parent in town clung to their children a little closer. Officer Maggie Cooper stood by her patrol car, watching the last streaks of sunlight fade into the horizon. The air was dry, charged with tension. Next to her, Thunder, the department's prized German Shepherd K9, paced in tight circles, ears pricked, tail rigid. The dog wasn't just alert, he was agitated, as if he sensed something the humans hadn't yet discovered. It had been 4 hours since Caleb vanished. 4 hours since his mother glanced away at the park, looked back, and found her son gone. The search area had been mapped, volunteers briefed, and local news stations were already broadcasting the boy's photo. But deep down, Cooper knew the statistics were unforgiving. The longer a child was missing, the slimmer the chances of a safe return. Thunder barked sharply. Cooper's hand instinctively went to his leash. The dog's body was taut, nose slicing through the arid evening air. His instincts had never failed her in 5 years. "All right, buddy," she murmured, unclipping the leash. "Show me what you've got." Thunder surged forward across the dusty lot of an abandoned construction site, the one left to decay after the developer went bankrupt. Rusted metal, broken concrete, and half-buried machinery littered the ground like the bones of something long dead. The place was eerily still, too quiet for a summer night. The boy's scent had been faint along the trail leading here, but Thunder's head was low, tail straight, moving with a single-minded focus that always sent a chill down Cooper's spine. It was like watching instinct come alive. She radioed her team. "Pawn unit entering the west perimeter. Thunder's on a lead." The reply crackled through. "Copy, proceed with caution. Drones are scanning the east side." Thunder weaved through rebar and sand piles, pausing to sniff, then darting ahead. Cooper followed, her flashlight beam cutting through the dust. She could still hear the boy's mother sobbing at the command post, pleading for someone to bring her child home. The first half hour revealed nothing, just tire marks, empty cans, and the dry rattle of the desert. But then Thunder froze, perfectly still. One paw lifted, nostrils flaring, ears locked on a large mound of sand near a half-collapsed barrier at the site's edge. "What is it?" Cooper whispered. Thunder didn't move. He began to dig. At first, Cooper thought he'd picked up an animal's scent, but Thunder's growls grew deeper, more urgent. His claws tore at the sand, flinging it aside. Cooper knelt beside him, shining her light. Nothing but sand. Still, the dog refused to stop. "Hey, Coop!" her partner called over the radio. "We're about to pull the drones." "You got anything?" She hesitated. "Maybe. Not sure yet." Thunder barked again, loud, sharp, almost desperate. Cooper felt the hairs on her neck stand up. "Hold on," she said into the mic. "He's on to something." She reached down, brushing away sand until her fingers struck something hard. Metal. A hollow clang echoed. Her pulse raced. It wasn't a rock, it was steel. Thunder's bark turned into a frantic whine, circling, then digging again. Cooper dropped to her knees, scraping away more dirt until she uncovered a corner, smooth, cold, and squared off. "What the hell?" she muttered. She hit her radio. "Dispatch, I need backup and a thermal drone at my location. Possible containment structure underground." For a tense minute, there was only static and the sound of Thunder panting at her side. Cooper's flashlight caught the edge of the steel object. It looked like an old shipping container, half buried in sand. Someone had gone to great lengths to hide it. When backup arrived, floodlights turned the site as bright as day. Officers formed a perimeter. The sheriff fired off questions, but Cooper barely heard him. Her heart was pounding too hard. Thunder sat beside the buried container, chest heaving, refusing to budge. The sheriff crouched next to her. "You think the kid's in there?" "I don't know," Cooper replied, "but Thunder does." They started digging. Shovels, hands, even a small excavator. Every clang of metal against the container echoed like a heartbeat. Cooper kept glancing at Thunder, ears forward, body trembling, eyes locked on that one spot. When they finally cleared enough sand, they found the door. Padlocked, rusted at the edges but sealed tight. No air holes, no markings, just a blank, cold sheet of steel. One of the rescue techs knelt down, pressing his ear to the door. He shook his head. "Nothing. I can't hear a thing." Cooper crouched lower, placing her own ear against the metal. At first there was only silence. Then, so faint she almost doubted herself. A soft thump. Then another. And another. Her breath caught. "There's something alive in there." "Get that lock off," the sheriff barked. They brought in bolt cutters, sparks flying into the desert night. The grinding of metal echoed through the air. Thunder barked once, sharp and urgent as if pushing them to hurry. The door finally gave way with a screech that seemed to stretch on forever. Darkness waited inside. A flashlight beam cut through the gloom, landing on a small figure curled up in the corner. "Jesus," someone whispered. Caleb Porter, face streaked with dirt, hands trembling, barely conscious, but alive. Paramedics rushed in, calling for oxygen, blankets, fluids. Cooper just knelt there, her knees sinking into the sand. She looked at Thunder. The dog was silent now, tail low, eyes gentle, watching as the boy was lifted out. In that moment, the weight of what could have happened hit her. 2 more hours, maybe less, and that container would have been a tomb. Later, the local news would call it a miracle beneath the sand. Cooper didn't care about the cameras or the headlines. She just stayed there, running her fingers through Thunder's fur. "You did good, partner," she whispered. He pressed his head against her shoulder, breathing slow and steady, finally at ease. Thunder had saved a life that night, reminding everyone that sometimes the line between tragedy and miracle is just one determined nose. If stories like this touch your heart, if you believe in the courage and instinct of dogs like Thunder, don't forget to subscribe to Animal Heroes. These true stories of loyalty and bravery deserve to be told, shared, and remembered. Not all heroes wear badges or capes. Some just follow a scent until they find hope buried in the sand. The sun still hadn't risen when Officer Maggie Cooper finally sat on the back bumper of her cruiser. Her boots were caked with sand, her hands still shaking from adrenaline. Her uniform clung to her, damp with sweat, dust, and the weight of the night. She hadn't slept. None of them had. But Caleb Porter was alive. That was all that mattered. Thunder lay at her feet, chest rising and falling in a slow, tired rhythm, his eyes half closed with exhaustion. He hadn't eaten or even taken water until Caleb was safely in the ambulance. During the 2-hour rescue, he hadn't moved except to press closer to the boy once the door opened, as if to reassure himself. Maggie reached down, scratching behind Thunder's ear. "You knew," she murmured. "You knew before any of us." Thunder's tail flicked, weak but satisfied. The scene was now sealed off. Floodlights still washed the construction site in harsh white. Yellow tape fluttered across every exposed surface. Near the backhoe, a team from the Arizona State Police was already setting up ground-penetrating radar. What was supposed to be a simple child rescue had just become something much bigger. Maggie looked up as Sheriff Joel Stanton approached, his shoulders stiff in his tan uniform. He carried a stainless steel thermos in one hand, a clipboard under his arm. "Here," he said, handing her the coffee. "Hot, strong enough to make you rethink your life choices." She managed a tired smile. "Is that your official review of the morning?" He didn't smile. "There's no record of that container," he said quietly. "Not in the zoning files, not in city permits, not even on the old blueprints. It's like it just appeared." Maggie frowned. "What about the developer? Someone must have—" "Company went bankrupt 5 years ago. Owners disappeared. Last known address is a P.O. box in Flagstaff. Nothing since." She took a long sip of the bitter coffee. "That container wasn't part of the site." "Nope." They both looked toward it. Now it sat like a monument, half buried, scarred by the excavator. The door stood open, propped back with a piece of rebar. Inside it was just as they'd left it. Dark, damp, scattered with a few old. Inside, there were only a few things. Some old blankets, a plastic bucket, and a cracked water jug with barely an inch of liquid left. Not nearly enough for a child to survive 2 days, but somehow Caleb had managed. The paramedics said his body temperature was dangerously low when they reached him. A few more hours, and it would have been a recovery, not a rescue. Maggie stared at the jug again. There were air tubes. Someone had set it up to keep him alive, but only just. Stanton's face was grim. Which means someone put him there. This wasn't a kid who wandered off and got trapped. Maggie felt her jaw tighten. The thought made her skin crawl. "Was it random?" she asked. "Or was he targeted?" Stanton shook his head. "We don't know yet. The parents are still at the hospital. Caleb hasn't said a word since we found him, just stares." "Shock," Maggie said. Stanton shrugged. "Or trauma. Forensics is on their way, but Maggie—" She turned to him. "This feels planned. Too neat. Too careful." He nodded. They both remembered. 2 years ago, 5 towns over, another missing child, Another sudden reappearance. Alive, but silent. That child had been found in a barn. No ransom, no signs of harm. Just lost time and no answers. Stanton sighed. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Maybe we just got lucky. But Maggie didn't believe in luck, not when Thunder had gone straight to the spot in under 20 minutes, not when the whole thing felt staged, like a test, as if someone wanted to see how far they could go. She watched Thunder stand, stretch, and slowly walk to the edge of the scene, tail low. He sat and stared at the open container, silent since the moment they'd opened it. At Brook Haven Medical Center, Caleb Porter lay in a pediatric ICU bed, surrounded by wires and the steady hum of machines. His mother, Amy, sat beside him, her fingers laced tightly with his, her body curled as if to shield him from the world. His father, Greg, stood nearby, quietly answering questions from a child psychologist flown in from Phoenix. But Caleb hadn't spoken. Not to his parents, not to the doctors, not even when they showed him his favorite toy truck, found at the park's edge. He just stared, blank, as if a part of him was still trapped underground. That evening, Maggie parked outside the hospital and sat in her car for a long time. Thunder slept in the back seat, checked by the vet, dehydrated, exhausted, but otherwise fine. His nose twitched in his sleep, chasing scents in his dreams. Maggie couldn't shake the image of Caleb's eyes in that container. The silence. The way Thunder had crouched before they even saw the steel, as if he could sense the life inside, calling out without a sound. She stepped out and walked toward the hospital. Inside, the fluorescent lights felt harsh and unnatural. A nurse pointed her to the waiting area outside the ICU, where Amy Porter sat with her head in her hands. Maggie approached quietly. "Mrs. Porter?" Amy looked up, her face pale and red-eyed. "Oh, Officer Cooper, how is he? The doctors say he's stable? They're hopeful?" Amy looked like she wanted to say more, but her lips trembled. Finally, she asked, "Did your dog really find him? All by himself?" Maggie nodded.
"He wouldn't leave the spot. He knew something was there." Amy swallowed hard. "I prayed. I didn't know who to pray to, but I hoped someone would feel it. I never thought it would be a dog." Maggie smiled gently. "Thunder's not just a dog.
"He's the reason Caleb's alive." Amy looked away, tears brimming. "They said it looked like he was put in there on purpose, but who would do that?" Maggie had no answer. Not yet. But the feeling in her gut told her this wasn't the last time she'd see a container like that. "Did Caleb say anything?" she asked softly. Amy hesitated, then nodded. "Just one word." Maggie leaned in. Amy whispered. "He said, whispers." Maggie froze. Amy wiped her eyes. "He kept saying it, over and over, before he fell asleep." The whispers were in the box. Later that night, back at her apartment, Maggie sat cross-legged on the floor, Thunder curled up beside her. Her laptop glowed in the darkness, tabs open to police files, missing child cases, underground storage, specs, and a grainy black and white security photo from 2 years ago. A man walking near a storage facility at 3 a.m., holding a small child's hand. That case was never solved. But now, with Thunder's help, Maggie had a feeling this container wasn't the only one. Someone out there was watching, waiting, testing the limits. And this time, they'd left behind a whisper. 3 days had passed since Caleb Porter was found, and Brook Haven still hadn't settled back into its old routine. The news vans had left, but a chill lingered in the police department, something that felt less like relief and more like dread. At her desk in the small precinct, Officer Maggie Cooper stared at a child's drawing spread out before her. It was simple, crayon on printer paper, a crooked gray square in the center surrounded by brown scribbles, and 2 stick figures, one small, one tall. Inside the gray square, Caleb had drawn something else. Tiny circles, dozens of them, like eyes peering out from the darkness. Maggie exhaled, leaned back in her chair, and rubbed her tired eyes. The boy still hadn't said much, only muttered, fragments in his sleep, most of it jumbled and hard to understand. It was dark. They didn't talk. They were quiet and wrong, but whenever the psychologist asked about the whispers, Caleb would shut down completely. Maggie wasn't a child psychologist, but she'd seen trauma before. In adults, it came out as silence or anger. In children, it surfaced in drawings, whispers, and details that didn't quite make sense, but couldn't be dismissed either. Thunder lay beside her chair, still alert, but clearly worn out from the ordeal. His ears perked up slightly when Chief Manning entered, coffee cup in hand, the sheriff's star chipped on the side. "You've been staring at that drawing for an hour," Manning said. "Hoping it'll confess?" Maggie managed a faint smile. "Just trying to figure out how a 4-year-old draws so many eyes in the dark." The chief leaned over, studying the paper. Maybe he just felt watched. Maybe that's his way of saying it. "Maybe," Maggie replied, but something didn't add up. Caleb couldn't have seen out of the container. There were only 2 plastic tubes for air. Whoever put him in there hadn't meant for him to see anything at all. So what did he mean by whispers? And why all the eyes? The chief noticed her expression. "You think there's more to this?" "I don't think it was random," she said. "The container, the air tubes, the location, it was all set up for one thing, to keep a child alive for 2 days. That's not an accident. It feels like a test." He watched her for a moment, then sat down across from her. "I get the gut feeling, Coop, but right now, we've got no prints, no video, no vehicle. If this was targeted, it was done by someone who knows how to disappear, which means it probably wasn't their first time." He didn't say more. The next day, Maggie returned to the construction site, Thunder with her, not for a search, but because he refused to stay behind. He sat alert in the back seat, tail flicking, eyes scanning the landscape as if still on duty. The container was gone, taken in as evidence, but the pit it left behind remained. A raw wound in the sand, marked off with cones and tape. The dig team had already checked for other containers, but found nothing. Maggie got out and crouched at the edge of the depression. Thunder hopped out and joined her, nose working the ground, sniffing at the dirt, tire marks, and the concrete barrier. He circled slowly, ears twitching, then stopped near a pile of discarded building materials, metal pipes, plywood, and a black tarp weathered by the sun. Thunder let out a low growl and began pawing at the tarp. Maggie moved closer. Underneath wasn't another container, but something else. A small red and white cooler, the kind you'd take to a picnic. She opened it carefully. Inside was a folded blue hoodie, child-sized. She called it in. An hour later, forensics was on site. They collected the hoodie, searched the area, and found a second cooler, half buried 10 feet away. This one held a child's juice box, half crushed, and a small stuffed rabbit missing one ear. Maggie watched in silence. These weren't survival supplies. They were comfort items, as if someone was preparing for a child or waiting for another. That night, Maggie couldn't sleep. She sat on her couch, the TV playing some forgettable crime show while Thunder snored at her feet. Her mind kept circling back to the rabbit, the hoodie, the word whispers. She opened her laptop and logged into the law enforcement database. She searched for key terms: missing child, container, no physical harm, found alive, no ransom. It took hours, but by 2:47 a.m., she had 4 matches. The first was in Utah, 5 years ago. A 6-year-old boy found in a drainage pipe under an overpass. Alive, no suspect. The second, Kansas. A 5-year-old girl found in a tool shed behind an abandoned fairground, clean and unharmed, no suspect. Third, Northern Nevada. Same pattern. A child vanished during a festival, reappeared 36 hours later with no memory, found in a locked closet at a closed bowling alley. No ransom, no footage, no suspect. Fourth, Arizona, 2 years ago. Maggie remembered that one. The case with the grainy black and white photo. A man leading a child near a storage unit. That child was found 2 days later, hidden in a lawn service trailer miles from where he disappeared. Each case was separated. by time and distance, but the similarities were chilling. These weren't ransom kidnappings. They were experiments. Maggie brought her findings to Chief Manning the next morning. He scanned the printouts. "You think this is a pattern?" "I think we're looking at a series of cases where children are taken, placed in confined spaces with just enough to survive, and left to be found. No ransom, no abuse, no contact, just waiting." He frowned. "That's not how most predators operate." "I don't think this is about control or gratification," Maggie said quietly. "I think it's about watching." Manning leaned back in his chair. "You're saying someone's studying the kids or testing us?" He was silent for a long moment. "This is bigger than us," he finally said. "You want to hand it over to someone higher up?" "I think we have to." That afternoon, Maggie called the regional FBI office. 2 days later, Special Agent Lena Ross arrived at the Brook Haven Police Department. Late 30s, sharp suit, sharper eyes. She shook Maggie's hand with a firm grip and took a seat across from her in the briefing room. "I've reviewed the files," Ross said. "They're not officially linked in our system, but you're not the first to notice the similarities." "Then why isn't anyone talking about it?" Maggie asked. "Because there's no hard evidence tying them together. No prints, no DNA, no vehicles, no witnesses. Each case is in a different state, years apart. But the method is identical." Ross nodded. "That's why I'm here." Maggie leaned in. "Do you think it'll happen again?" Ross didn't hesitate. "Yes." She opened a folder and slid a photo across the table, a small steel container being hoisted by crane from a forest in Oregon. Same size, same air tubes, same setup. The child in that one hadn't survived. 2 weeks ago, Ross said quietly. That's when we started connecting the dots. Maggie stared at the photo, heart pounding. "If we don't stop whoever's behind this," Ross continued, "there will be more." Thunder, lying near the door, lifted his head and let out a low, steady growl. The briefing room was silent except for the hum of the projector and the occasional creak of a chair. Agent Ross stood at the front, laser pointer in hand, her gaze fixed on a wall of children's faces behind her. 6 kids, 6 towns, 5 survivors. "One thing in common," she said, her voice calm and precise. "All were placed in custom containers, all given minimal supplies, all found within 48 hours, except one." She pointed to a black and white photo, framed in a thin border. "Malcolm Tate, age 6. He died of asphyxiation before search teams could reach him. We believe these cases are connected," Ross continued. "We just don't know how many more there are. Most departments treat them as isolated incidents or lucky rescues. But they're not luck. They're orchestrated." Maggie sat near the back, Thunder's head resting against her boot. She kept her eyes on the screen, but her mind drifted to Caleb, still silent, still flinching at sudden noises. He hadn't even cried. It was as if his feelings had been locked away with him in that steel box. Ross clicked to the next slide, a map of the western states. Utah, Nevada, Arizona, Oregon, New Mexico, each marked with a pin, each representing a child who vanished and returned. Alive, but changed. "These aren't abductions for ransom, trafficking, or revenge," Ross said. "This is someone trying to learn something. We believe the suspect or suspects are conducting psychological experiments." Someone at the table muttered, "On kids?" Ross nodded. "On fear, on survival, on timing. They leave just enough air, just enough water. They monitor how long it takes to find them. They change the variables. Every child is part of a twisted experiment." Someone else cursed under their breath. Maggie leaned forward. "So what do we do now?" Ross paused. "We wait." "Wait?" Another officer scoffed. "You just said this person is active. You want us to do nothing?" Ross turned, her voice even quieter. "They're watching us. They always have been. They pick places where police are reactive, not proactive. Small towns, underfunded departments. If we move too quickly, we scare them off and lose the pattern. We need them to repeat their process. That's how we catch them." Maggie hated every word. Not because Ross was wrong, but because she was probably right. That night, Maggie sat alone at her kitchen table, flipping through case files. Thunder lay by the sliding door, eyes half open, tracking her movements. The map Ross had shown replayed in her mind. If there was a pattern, maybe she could see it from another angle. She pulled out a notepad and started listing dates, cross-referencing them with local events, festivals, holidays, school breaks. Then something odd caught her eye. 3 of the disappearances, including Caleb's, had happened within a day of fire department training drills in those towns. She flipped back through her notes. Another case had happened the same day the local police were tied up with a county-wide drug task force meeting, leaving the station short-staffed. Maggie sat up straighter. "They're not just watching the kids," she muttered. "They're watching us." She got up, opened her laptop, and pulled up city resource allocation reports. Sure enough, every disappearance lined up with times when first responders were stretched thin. Not enough patrols, not enough coverage. It wasn't random, it was deliberate. The next morning, Maggie met Agent Ross at a quiet diner on the edge of town, the kind with burnt coffee, no Wi-Fi, and menus that hadn't changed in decades. Ross slid into the booth, raising an eyebrow. "You look like you haven't slept." "Didn't," Maggie replied, spreading out her notepad.
"This isn't just about the kids."
"They're testing us, timing our response, watching our search patterns." Ross read through the notes, then nodded. "That fits. They wait until the town is vulnerable. Not just emotionally, but operationally. You think they have access to local systems? I think they know how to read them. City calendars, emergency alerts, all of it's public." Ross sipped her coffee. "Or they're here watching up close." The thought hit Maggie like a punch. Back at the station, another call came in. A mother in a neighboring county reported her 5-year-old daughter missing, gone from the backyard in broad daylight. The fence was locked. No sign of forced entry. Just vanished. Maggie's heart pounded. "When was she last seen?" "About 2 hours ago." Maggie grabbed her vest and Thunder's harness. "We're going." Ross met her at the scene. A modest house surrounded by dry pasture. The girl Annie Flores had been playing with sidewalk chalk. The only clue was a single pink sneaker near the fence. Maggie crouched beside it, holding it out for Thunder. "Find her, boy." Thunder sniffed, ears flicking, then surged forward. He tracked along the fence, past the barn, and into the brush beyond. The team followed, Ross, deputies, volunteers. The wind kicked up dust, the sun relentless. Thunder led them half a mile to a collapsed storm drain tangled in thorny weeds. He stopped, barked, and lay down. Maggie rushed over, scanning the ground. There, a patch of fresh, darker soil. "Dig!" she shouted. The team tore through the brush, shovels and hands flying. Minutes later, they hit steel. Another box. Same design. Same air tubes. This time a note was taped to the door. Ross pulled it off with gloved hands. It read, "How fast are you this time?" Maggie didn't wait for tools. She jammed a crowbar into the edge. The steel groaned, then gave way. Inside was Annie, pale and gasping, but alive. They carried her into the sunlight as she blinked, mouth opening like she'd forgotten how to breathe. Her first word was faint but clear. "Doggy." Thunder leaned down and licked her cheek. Later at the hospital, Ross examined the note again. Cheap paper, generic ink. No prints, no DNA, no fibers, just that single taunt. "How fast are you this time?" The container had been placed less than 3 hours earlier, meaning the suspect had moved quickly, planned carefully, and probably watched the rescue from nearby. Maggie sat across the room, arms crossed, staring at nothing. Her mind replayed every step, every second lost. "This isn't a pattern anymore," she said at last. "It's a challenge," Ross nodded. "And they just raised the stakes." Thunder stirred at her feet, letting out a low whine. Not fear, but anticipation. Somewhere out there, someone was keeping score, and the clock had started again. Thunder had barely stepped through the precinct door when he stopped, head up, nostrils flaring. Then he exhaled, padded to his bed, and curled up without a sound. Maggie watched him settle, then dropped into her chair, exhausted. They'd found Annie Flores alive, thank God. But what she felt wasn't relief. It was dread. The note still echoed in her mind. "How fast are you this time?" Whoever was behind this wasn't just targeting children. They were watching the rescuers, measuring every move, taking notes. It was getting personal. Agent Ross entered the precinct, a file in one hand, her expression unchanged for days. Controlled, unreadable, razor sharp. She nodded at Maggie. "We ran the note's paper through spectrometry," she said, walking over. "Standard office stock, but the ink is carbon-based. It came from a typewriter, not a printer." Maggie's brows rose. "A typewriter?" "Probably an old Smith Corona or something similar. That narrows it down. We're looking for someone who avoids digital tools on purpose." "A Luddite or a purist?" Ross said. "Either way, they don't want to leave a digital trail. That's not random. That's training. Maggie's stomach twisted. Military? Could be. Or someone in academia, psychology, engineering, anyone obsessed with human behavior, stress, or reaction times. Ross placed the file on Maggie's desk. Inside were more reports, maps, and charts. There's more, Ross added. The cooler you found with the hoodie and rabbit, no DNA, but there were faint traces of phenylethylamine, a chemical that spikes in humans during fear. Maggie blinked. You're saying they tested for that? We're saying, Ross replied, they might be collecting it. That afternoon, Ross and Maggie drove out to the spot where Annie had been found. The storm drain was still cordoned off with police tape, a forensics tent pitched nearby. The desert wind had picked up again, gritty and dry, blowing sand across their boots. Maggie crouched by the dig site, brushing away a patch of disturbed earth. They timed this drop perfectly, she said. 3 hours after the county fair started, half the department was tied up with traffic. Same playbook as Brook Haven, Ross agreed. Maximum distraction, minimum resistance. And if Thunder hadn't caught the scent— She didn't finish. Maggie stood, dusting off her hands. They're taunting us now. That note wasn't a warning. It was a scoreboard, Ross nodded. We need to flip the board. That night, the task force gathered in the back conference room of Brook Haven Town Hall. Maps covered the tables, thumbtacks and string marking patterns no one could quite explain. Maggie stared at the red circle for Caleb's container. It felt more like a grave than a clue. I think we're looking at this the wrong way, she said, turning to the group. We're trying to predict where they'll strike based on past locations. But what if we start thinking like they do? The sheriff leaned in. Go on. We know they monitor first responder resources, community events, traffic patterns. They need windows when coverage is thin, but they also need time. Time to place the containers, to scout the area, to blend in. Blend in? Someone scoffed. Maggie nodded. They act normal. Maybe they even volunteer. Construction, utilities, road crews. They know where to go, what to wear, how to avoid suspicion. Ross added, they know our routines, and they're using it against us. The room fell silent. Maggie stepped forward. We start checking employee lists, contractors, anyone with access to infrastructure. Look for travel patterns that match the incident dates and see if there are disappearances before or after in those areas. If this is organized, someone's moving around. And we watch our own calendar, Ross said. Upcoming events, parades, trainings, holidays. If there's another attempt, it'll be when we're distracted. The team got to work. 3 days later, a call came from Silver Hills, New Mexico, a quiet retirement town 2 counties over. A utility worker had spotted a strange box under the deck of a recently vacated cabin. He hadn't touched it, just felt it didn't belong. Ross and Maggie arrived within 90 minutes. Thunder, restless from days of waiting, perked up as soon as the truck stopped, paws twitching with anticipation. The cabin sat among cottonwoods, dusty and silent. The back deck creaked as Maggie stepped onto it. Beneath, hidden by plywood and sandbags, was a square metal object. Ross pulled back the cover. The box was there, identical to the others. Maggie's heart pounded. "A get cutter," she called, "and call EMTs. We don't wait." But the lock was already broken. The door hung open. She pulled it wide. Inside, the box was empty. No child. Just a tape recorder. Ross raised an eyebrow. "That's new." Maggie pressed play. The recorder clicked, then a few seconds of silence. Then, 4 saves, 1 failure, 1 fake. Click. Back at the precinct, tension filled the air. "The message confirms what we suspected," Ross said. "They're tracking every incident, treating them like controlled outcomes." "But why leave a box with no child?" the sheriff asked. Maggie stared at the transcript. "They wanted to see how fast we'd respond if we thought it was real. They're watching how we escalate, how we move, how much ground we cover," Ross added. "Now they know we're ready, even if there's no victim." A rookie officer flipping through service logs looked up. "There's something else. Last week someone requested temporary access to the Silver Hills water line, maintenance authorization. The permit was legit, approved under the name Daniel Flagg." Ross turned. "Does that name show up anywhere else?" They ran it. A moment later, yes, Flagg requested access to a utility vault in Junction Ridge, Nevada, the day before the Malcolm Tate case. Maggie's jaw tightened. Ross stood. We've got our first real lead. That night back home, Maggie pulled Thunder's bed closer to the couch and sat on the floor beside him. He rested his head on her lap, letting out a long sigh. "You're keeping score too, aren't you?" she murmured, scratching his ears. He closed his eyes, but she could feel the tension in his pause. Always ready, always listening. Outside, the desert wind battered the windows. Somewhere far off, too distant to see or hear, someone was already planning the next box. But this time, they weren't the only ones watching. The name Daniel Flagg felt like the first real grip in a mountain of shadows. Agent Lena Ross ran it through every law enforcement and federal database she could access. The results were both frustrating and unsettling. The name was tied to multiple utility requests, each with different IDs, all legitimate, all approved. But the man himself, no photo, no address, no tax record, no credit history, no social media, just permits, signatures, and a trail of ghost-like footprints crossing 3 states in 4 years. Whoever Daniel Flagg was, he knew how to disappear in plain sight. Maggie Cooper stood at the precinct's evidence board, staring at a grainy black-and-white security photo of a white maintenance van parked outside a shuttered shopping center in Junction Ridge, the same town where Malcolm had died in a steel box. The van had no plates, no company logo, but now it had a pattern, a shape, and Thunder had picked up something else. "The scent again?" Ross asked, stepping into the room. Maggie nodded. Same industrial grease, same rubber and adhesive. Thunder caught it on the cooler near Caleb's box, and again in Silver Hills. Ross frowned. So he's not just building the boxes, he's prepping the drop sites and moving fast. The Silver Hills drop was less than 4 hours old when we got there, Maggie added. He's staying close within a day's drive. Ross handed her a folder. This might help. A local reported an abandoned maintenance van behind a vacant motel on Route 72. Matches the description. They got suspicious after seeing someone in City Works overalls, but the Public Works Department said no one was scheduled. Maggie's pulse quickened. When was this? Last night. She didn't wait. The motel sat like a forgotten memory just off the highway, its paint peeling, lot overgrown with weeds, baking in the sun. It hadn't been open in over a year. The neon sign was faded, barely a ghost of red. A battered white van sat under a crooked mesquite tree, half in shadow, tires sinking into the dirt. Thunder leapt from the cruiser before Maggie even killed the engine. His body was tense but controlled, nose high, tail steady. He wasn't anxious. He was locked in. Maggie approached slowly, Ross covering the far side, both armed, vests zipped tight. The heat shimmered off the pavement, distorting the view but not the outline of the van. No plates, a cracked mirror, and a faint metallic smell hit Maggie as she got close. Thunder growled, low and deep. Ross circled left, watching the blind spot. Maggie stepped to the front, rapped on the window. Nothing. She opened the door. Inside, the van was a mobile workshop. Metal shelves lined the walls, stacked with zip ties, plastic tubing, duct tape, portable fans, batteries, and steel sheets pre-cut into panels. A small folding cot was bolted to the back wall, next to a chemical toilet and a compact camping fridge. "It's not a transport vehicle," Maggie said. "It's a rolling command post." "Jesus," Ross muttered. Maggie stepped inside, Thunder at her side. She picked up a clipboard wedged into the dash. On it was a hand-drawn grid, a map, not of roads, but of timing windows. "Look at this," Maggie said, handing it to Ross. "Column A is timestamps. Column B is estimated patrol cycles. Column C is—" Ross read, "Survivability margin, east." "Who is this guy?" Maggie asked. Ross scanned the van. "Someone who doesn't see people as people, just data points." Back at the precinct, the task force set up a war room in the gym across the street. Every wall became a timeline. Every photo, every box, every child mapped out in brutal, meticulous order. And at the center of it all, Daniel Flagg. "This isn't just one person," Ross said at the next briefing. "Maybe it started that way, but now there's evidence he's got help. The boxes are too precise, the drop's too quick. Either he's got military-level logistics, or he's not working alone anymore." Maggie looked down at a printout of the van's supply receipts. Most of the materials were bought with cash, some at hardware stores, some ordered online under fake names. But a few had traceable serial numbers, especially the portable CO2 monitors used in every box. Cross-reference that model number, Maggie said. If even one matches another site, we've got a link. A few hours later, the call came in. One of the CO2 monitors was traced to a purchase in Flagstaff, Arizona, under the name Stephen L. Grayson, a known alias used once before to rent a storage unit 2 years ago. That same unit had briefly held a child during a failed abduction, a case that went cold after the child was returned unharmed. Flag had been operating longer than anyone realized. That night, Maggie couldn't sleep. She walked Thunder along the edge of town, past blinking traffic lights, the shuttered diner, the old post office. The desert was so quiet she could almost hear her own heartbeat. Thunder trotted beside her, more alert than usual, ears flicking at every sound. He'd been restless since the motel. Maggie wondered what it must be like to sense something close, but not be able to name it. That strange, psychic pull dogs had. The one science still couldn't explain. Back at her apartment, she turned on the shower, hoping the water would wash away more than just the day. She'd barely stepped out when her phone buzzed. A text from Ross. "Check your email. We've got video." Maggie wrapped herself in a towel and hurried to her laptop. The footage was from a dash cam belonging to a local rancher who'd driven a remote service road 2 counties east. On a hunch, Ross had asked for any footage from the 24-hour window around the last drop. The timestamp, 3:14 a.m., 2 days before Silver Hills. The camera caught a lone figure walking along the shoulder, dressed in dark coveralls, carrying a long rectangular case. No face, no plates, just a silhouette. Maggie froze the frame. There, barely visible, a patch on the figure's shoulder. She zoomed in. Brook Haven Water District. But it wasn't current. It was an old patch, retired over a decade ago. Someone had planned this, worn it like a disguise, counted on grainy footage, and knew exactly how far to stay from the camera's focus. But something about it felt off, too staged, too careful. The next morning, Maggie arrived at the precinct early. Thunder followed, calmer now, as if he sensed the storm had paused for a moment. She pinned the still from the video to the board, drew a line from it to the van. Then from the van to each town, each box, each child. And for the first time, she saw it. Not just a pattern, but a route. Flag, or whoever he really was, wasn't picking towns at random. He was following a loop, a wide, slow spiral that circled closer to Brook Haven with every pass. The next drop might not be in some distant desert. It could be right here in their own town. And this time it wouldn't be a test. It would be personal. That morning, the desert air felt charged, like the moments before a storm, even though the sky was clear. Maggie Cooper stood in the middle of the Brook Haven elementary playground, arms crossed, eyes scanning every corner. Traffic cones were set up for a fire drill later that morning. The kids were still in class. The hum of AC units filled the silence. Everything felt too normal, too quiet, and that's what had her on edge. She wasn't alone. Thunder paced beside her, low to the ground, ears twitching every few seconds. He'd been like this since sunrise. Tense, impatient, distracted. Like something in the air was pulling at him, even if he couldn't explain it. Ross had said it clearly the night before. He's coming back. This loop you found, it ends here. And if the pattern was right, they had hours, not days. The last container had been hidden inside a place frequented by children. A church playground, a community pool, a summer camp pavilion. This time, all signs pointed to Brook Haven Elementary. Maggie glanced toward the janitor's shed at the edge of the property. It was old, rusted, and just far enough from the main building that someone could work behind it without being seen from the road. "Let's check it again," she said. Thunder didn't need to be told twice. He moved ahead, tail stiff, nose in the air. Maggie followed close behind. She'd checked this spot twice already. But this time Thunder stopped. He didn't bark. He sat. Then slowly Thunder lay down, his gaze locked on the base of the shed. Maggie felt a chill run through her. She dropped to one knee, brushing her hand along the shed's foundation. There, just beneath the overhang, was a patch of freshly disturbed soil. "Call it in," she said into her radio. Possible drop site, southeast corner of the school lot. Quiet lockdown for all students. Within minutes, a single siren chirped, just enough to alert officers without causing panic. Ross arrived, vest zipped, hand on her holster. 2 deputies followed, carrying shovels and a K9 camera probe. They started digging. It didn't take long. 8 inches down, the tip of a steel box appeared. Same size, same air tubes, same meticulous construction. But this time the box wasn't just sealed, it was wired. "Back, everyone back," Ross shouted, arms up. The bomb squad was called in. The school was evacuated under the pretense of a gas leak to avoid chaos. Parents were notified. Helicopters stayed grounded. Maggie stood with her arms wrapped tightly around herself, Thunder at her heel. Both watched as the bomb techs worked. The verdict? A mock charge, non-functional, but convincing enough to trigger a full emergency response. Another test. This time there was a note taped inside the box, typed in the same font, just one line. "You flinched." Maggie stared at it in silence. Ross shook her head. He wanted us to overreact. He wanted to see how far we'd go. "And we showed him," Maggie said. "Every resource, every response time, every vulnerability. He's watching us like we're the ones in the box." Later that night, Maggie sat in her patrol truck outside Caleb Porter's house. Thunder was curled up on the seat beside her, finally calm. Inside, the lights glowed softly. She could see Caleb's silhouette in the window, holding his toy truck and looking out into the night. The boy was talking now, slowly, hesitantly, but he was speaking. He told his mother about the man with the quiet eyes who put him in the box. How the man never yelled, never touched him, just whispered instructions, told him to stay still, promised someone would come. Caleb's description matched no one in any database, but it confirmed what they'd feared all along. Flagg, or whoever he was, didn't see himself as a kidnapper. He saw himself as a teacher. The following week, the white van turned up again, parked neatly in a church lot in Las Cruces, New Mexico. Empty, spotless, but this time there was no box, just another note. "I know what you fear now. No prints, no DNA, same paper, same ink." Ross flew out to process the scene. Maggie stayed behind. She needed space, needed to breathe. She was burning out, and she knew it, so she took Thunder hiking. They wandered trails up past the bluffs overlooking town, away from sirens and questions and the endless hunt for a ghost. The desert wind wrapped around them, a blanket of dust and silence. Thunder walked ahead, sniffing the air, tail loose and easy. He was finally at peace. But Maggie wasn't, because she knew this wasn't over. Flagg had pulled back, not because he was finished, but because he'd gotten what he wanted. He'd tested the limits, measured the pulse of the town, and now he'd vanish again, until the next drop or until someone stopped him. That night, on her porch, Maggie found a package. No label, no return address. She stepped inside cautiously, Thunder growling low, protective but not aggressive. She opened it slowly. Inside was a tape cassette, just like the one from Silver Hills. She didn't even own a cassette player anymore, but the station did. She brought the cassette to the station after hours, sat alone in the evidence room, closed the blinds, and pressed play. The tape hissed for a few seconds, then a voice. Male, calm, deliberate. "You're better than most, Officer Cooper." A long pause. But not fast enough. Click, static, end. Maggie leaned back in her chair, heart pounding. He'd been watching her, specifically her, studying her moves. This wasn't just about systems anymore. It was personal. Weeks went by. No more boxes, no more sightings. But the town didn't forget. Parents still held their children a little tighter. The school district put up new cameras. And Maggie, she never stopped scanning every unfamiliar car, every new face, every temporary worker in a reflective vest. She started training other K-9 handlers across the state, teaching them how to spot the scent patterns Thunder had learned, the subtle signs most would overlook. She called it the Thunder Protocol, because if not for that dog, sharp-nosed, stubborn, loyal to the end, there would be a headstone with Caleb Porter's name on it, and maybe others too. One morning, months later, Maggie woke to the sound of birds outside her window and the soft thump of Thunder's paws on the hardwood. Sunlight poured in warm and golden. For once the town was peaceful, but Maggie knew it wouldn't last. The boxes were still out there, and so was he, watching, waiting, calculating. But now so were they. Thank you for following this story. We'd love to hear your thoughts. What do you think the man behind the boxes really wants? And do you believe he's working alone? Share your theories below. We're listening. And somewhere out there, so is he.